Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I don't know if I pronounced either of those correctly, but we're going to go with it anyway. Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Dostoyevsky. Came out in 1980. No, that's not right. 1880. This book came out in 1880-ish. And Fyodor Dostoyevsky died about a year after it came out. Let's talk about the cover first. You know, I always review covers of any novel that gets a book review on here gets a cover review too. So this was done by Signet Classics. You know, there's a lot of different versions of the Brothers Karamazov. But I happen to read this one. It's the only version I've got. It's not in focus. But anyway, the cover is, all right. I mean, it's a drawing of an old dude. I'm assuming that would be Fyodor Karamazov, the sort of the father figure in this book. At least that's who I think that's a portrait of. We're just going to go with that too. This was translated from the original Russian by Constance Garnett. Again, I like to collect the Signet Classics because especially if they were written in a foreign language, I usually tend to like the translations that they do. Especially the one they did for War and Peace, which is one of my favorite novels of all time. Another great Russian novel by Leo Tolstoy. I loved the Signet Classic translation more than any other translation. So I've tended to stick to the Signet Classic brand just for that. Let's talk about the book itself. Okay, I'm out of breath. I didn't know reviewing Dostoyevsky novel would leave me so breathless. But anyway, it has. Theodore Karamazov is the patriarch of the Karamazov family. Now, Fyodor Dostoyevsky is the author. Why he named the father of the family the same as his name, Fyodor, it'd be like me, Brian Lee Durfee, having one of the main characters in my novel named Brian Lee. It'd just be fucking bizarre. Anyway, as an aside, in my book, by the way, I don't know what I'm talking about. In my book, Fyodor Dostoyevsky, I actually, in my book, on the map, I actually named, and I think it's right here, I actually named one of the places in my fantasy series Fyodor. I don't know if you can see that, but I named it Fyodor after one of my favorite novelists, Fyodor Dostoyevsky. So, anyway, let's get to the book. Fyodor Karamazov is the dad. He's not a likable guy. He's not a good guy. In fact, his kids think that he's so bad that he should be murdered. He should be just killed. Now, as I was reading this book, I'm like reading what's happening, and this is the second time I've read this book. I was reading to just see how bad of a dude this was. Because on the back it says one of the worst people in the history of literature is Fyodor Karamazov, one of the most evil characters ever written. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm reading some of the stuff he's doing, I'm like, oh, he ain't that bad. All he does, his one main crime is he ignores his kids. That's about it. He's not necessarily cruel, and unless you consider being ignored cruel, but that's pretty much all he really does. I mean, he kind of is a smart ass, and kind of like he just says things that are like, but he doesn't really, I mean, he's kind of bad. I guess he's bad. Let's just say he's bad. Anyway, his first son, Dmitri, is born, and then his mother dies. And once the mother dies, Fyodor Karamazov he's not the type of guy that's going to be a single dad. That's it. He's not Mr. Mom. He's not going to raise this kid very well. So in lieu of, he knows his limitations. Let's just say that. And so in lieu of raising the kid by himself, probably knowing he's going to do a shit job, he just ignores the kid. He just says, live in a big manor house, just fucking do it. I don't even know you. In fact, he sometimes forgets that the kid even exists. And the kid is pretty much raised by his servants. But Dmitri goes on to become sort of a duelist, and he joins the army. He's a bit of an adventurer. He expects an inheritance from his father. He doesn't know if he's going to get it or not. And in the theme of the book, he sort of represents the superficiality and the flesh is kind of what his theme, that's kind of what Dmitri represents. Now, the second son, Ivan, represents the intellect. He's sort of the smart guy. He is also raised by he also gets born of a woman, and the father just doesn't care, just is indifferent, apathetic. Also, the third son, Alexei, who, for whatever reason, we don't ever call him Alexei in the book. His name is Alyosha in the book. So Alyosha represents the spiritual side. Alyosha kind of becomes a man of the cloth, as it were. So we've got Ivan, who's born of the same mother as Alyosha. Ivan represents the intellect. Alexei, or Alyosha, represents the spiritual, which is interesting for this book because the entire theme of this book is intellect, logic, and reason versus spiritual faith and belief. And we'll get into that a little bit later. The fourth son is Smerdyakov. I think I said that right. It's spelled Smerdyakov. Smerdyakov. He is the illegitimate bastard son of our Fyodor Karamazov. Also ignored by his father. Surprise, surprise. The father basically ignores everybody. Smerdyakov represents sort of the sly and the silent type, the bad boy, the cruel and the craven. I mean, that's sort of what he represents. So we've got these four sons all thematically representing different things. Dmitri representing superficiality, the flesh. Ivan representing intellect, logic, reason. Alexei representing spirituality, faith, and belief. And then Smerdyakov just representing cruelty. And what happens is they all hate their father. Their father is murdered. I'm not going to tell you which one of the sons murders the father, but they're all in on it. One of them actually does the deed. And then we get ourselves into a story about, well, the first third of the book, before the father's even murdered, is a story of just a dysfunctional family. But then once the father's murdered, we get into themes of love, redemption, Christianity. We get into 19th century Russian politics and courtroom and law. I mean, this actually turns into a courtroom drama / religious discussion. Not only does it turn into a religious discussion, but there's a chapter called the Grand Inquisitor, which is actually a chapter that it's an entire chapter based off of Jesus and the devil having a debate about, excuse me, Jesus and the devil having a debate about belief, faith, religion, logic, reason, and facts. And it's just kind of like one of those interesting things that you can do in an old-timey Russian novel that you probably can't get away with in, say, one of my novels, or one of Tad Williams, or one of Stephen. Well, you might be able to. But, I mean, you just can't all of a sudden have the devil and Jesus Christ show up in the middle of your book and stage a debate. But they do, and it's kind of interesting, the philosophies that are thrown back and forth in this book. I really like this book for its philosophies and its themes. Where I think it falls short of Tolstoy, because Tolstoy is my favorite Russian author, if not my favorite, well, he's in my top 10 favorite authors of all time. I will just say that Tolstoy also adds all of the debates and dramas are centering around theme and a lot of the discussions. But one thing that Tolstoy does better than Dostoyevsky is Tolstoy also gives us a great explanation of place and time. I mean, we get to, if in a Tolstoy novel things are happening in a grand ballroom, he'll describe the grand ballroom in great detail, which I love. Dostoyevsky, we don't even know what town this is taking place in Russia. Through the whole book, it's just called The Town. We don't even know. I mean, at least give us something. I mean, give us that's the only criticism I have of this, is I don't know what any of the characters really look like. I don't know what any of the buildings or landscapes that they traveled through looked like. But I certainly know what everybody thought and said. That's the difference between the two writers. Both of them do great on theme. Man's morality versus God's existence. That is in Tolstoy and in Dostoyevsky. Tolstoy just gives us a little extra by centering us and grounding us in a place and time that we can feel. Whereas I think we're just floating through a Russian dreamscape in this one, where we really don't even know where we're at any given time. It's all mostly just dialogue and philosophizing, if that's even a word. But anyway, that being said, I give, because I'm not going to give away the ending or the plot. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you who murdered the dad. A dad who just wasn't that bad of a dad. I mean, they say he's the worst villain in the history of literature, and I'm like, reading it going, the worst thing he's done is just, he didn't ever talk to his kids. Seems like a great relationship to me. Let's give this an 8.5 out of 10. I think everybody should read it once. I've read it twice. That might have been probably one more time than I really needed to have read it. But we will be reading Crime and Punishment soon and leaving a review. I do remember liking that one a little bit better.